Namo Buddhaya. Namo Varatanataya. Blessings of the Noble Triple Gem. And my greetings once again to my fellow monastics at Dhammadharini Monastery, Venerable Bhikkhunīs and Seminaries, Anagarikas, Nekama, Upasikas, Dhamma friends, and everyone who's joining us also. Venerables at Aranya Bodhi Awakening Forest Hermitage on the Sonoma Coast, greetings to you, and also to all our Dhamma friends who are joining from afar. And it is the Magga full moon night here, and it seems like the rains have paused for a little while for the full moon rise, and there's a wonderful ambiance here at our monastery on this full moon night. I'm also mindful that actually around the country, all around North America, and Hawaii as well, and then also around the world, especially the Theravada Buddhists of South and Southeast Asia, all around the world are gathered together on this very special Sangha day, one of the special days for Sangha gathering in Buddhism, especially people gather together and especially undertake precepts, as many of you have for the day today. I know there are some who joined from this morning undertaking the Uposatha precepts for the day. And then also especially giving the time for meditation and for listening to, reading, studying, contemplating, and discussing the Dhamma, particularly for the threefold training or the three trainings that what the Buddha mentioned, even the Noble Eightfold Path, and has its three categories, the three trainings of Sila, of Samadhi, and of Panya. And it's really a great community support, I think, to think about all of the others who are well using or well attending to the teachings and to giving and making special effort today. And if we sense this in ourselves, it can be a support to us to feel connected to the greater Sangha around the world and know that there are others who are doing likewise, as we also are. Even to think back, this being a special commemorative day, to think back to the meanings of this day, more than 2,500, 2,600 years ago, when the Buddha himself was actually very new in his teaching under this Māgha full moon. And he had just recently encountered the two very keen fellows who were to become his foremost leading disciples, whose relics we have here behind us, very small portion of their relics on either side of the image of the Buddha. The noble venerables Sariputta and Mahamokkalāna. So this is the anniversary then of the Sariputtas, also the Sariputta's awakening, and then of the after the Buddha had then sent his early disciples far and wide, also of the first big Sangha reunion in Buddhism, which is said to have happened even spontaneously because they didn't have internet and they didn't send, no, they didn't. I mean, maybe they had Arahant internet, just through consciousness and intuition somehow, but they were all spread far and wide, and then all came back together again. So in 2,500 Arahants then came back together again under this full moon. And then also it's recollected that the Buddha then gave a teaching called the Ovada Patimokkha, which has been mentioned earlier on today by my co-teacher, Aya Brahmawara, who has been offering programs earlier on today. And the Ovada Patimokkha then is a very simple, it's a Vinaya teaching, but really it's like Dhamma and Vinaya are united together in this teaching. And so I want to mention that teaching briefly in a minute or two. And then also later on, then the Buddha, following year, then formally appointed his two chief disciples who I just mentioned. Mahamoggallana, then his great awakening day is 1 week from now on this coming lunar quarter. So he's still in that earlier year, still striving at this time, but he had met the Buddha. And on hearing the teaching of the Buddha in brief, he had first Sariputta hearing this teaching from the Venerable Assaji, who was one of the first 5 bhikkhus. Then Sariputta hearing this teaching, actually, even when he saw the noble Assaji, he knew that there was something very special there. And he had the thought that what he had been searching for, what they had been searching for, he thought he had seen it. When he asked for one teaching, even in brief, then he experienced the opening of the Dhamma eye, entering into the noble stream. And this is entering the path of the Arahants. Then they see the Dhamma for themselves, catch the proper right glimpse of Nibbana for themselves. And then it's like a chain reaction, because then when he went to meet his friend, who came to be known as Mahamoggallana, then Mahamoggallana, they had been friends for a while, and they made a pact with one another, a seeker's path, a searcher's path. And then when Venerable Mahamoggallana saw him, Sariputta, then he knew, already he knew. And then just that knowing, that recognition right there. And then passing on, hearing that same brief, pithy, brief teaching of the Dhamma, then he too experienced the stream entry. But it was still then 1 more week for him after meeting the Buddha before he was going to have his own complete awakening experience. And then in the following year, with the Sangha having grown significantly up to thousands of members, and then also authorizing those leading monks, those bhikkhu disciples. Before that time, they always brought any new students to the Buddha to be ordained. But later on, then the Buddha, under this full moon, then authorized those, this is a very important step for the Sangha, then authorized those leading Sangha members to give ordination, to give the going forth and full acceptance into the Sangha at this time. So we can see how important of a day for the Sangha and for the heritage of the Sangha, you know, for the forms of the Sangha that we now have, also for the ordination, the entry into monastic life. All of this is in the hands of the Sangha and passed down in this way. Then years later, after decades of teaching, also it's under this full moon, then according to the traditions, that the Buddha, when he was then 80 years old, or coming up on 80 years old, in the 80th year of his life, then that he realized it's time for his great final passing that we call Mahaparinibbana. This is the Nibbana without remainder. So then this was announced to the Sangha then years later. So it's really interesting because it's also kind of like the season now, I feel, in a way. With the winter and the transition of the winter, it's like many of the old things, we're seeing the last remnants of the things from the previous year dying off. At the same time, we're seeing the new spring blossoms are starting to blossom. And so we have both of these things, at least here in North America, that are happening at this time, that are also, commemorated on this day. So it's like strong recollection of the passing of the old, and then the, heritage, the Buddha's heritage to the Sangha, and then also the new beginnings of the Sangha, for the Buddha himself, and then this kind of moving towards the second new beginning, to what it was to have the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha without the living physical body of the Buddha present anymore. And we found in one of the old texts, it's in the Pali text, we have the Gotami Therī Apadana, which tells of the final parinibbana of the Buddha's foster mother, Mahapajapati Gotami Therī, is also known as the first Bhikkhunī. So we have this in the Pali text, also recorded in Tibetan. The version is recorded in Tibetan, also versions recorded in Chinese. Basically the same, some small differences are there. Like for Satipatthanas Sutta, also recording, it's basically the same, but also some small differences in these old recordings, these old translations. But in the Tibetan text, it mentions then that Mahapajapati Gotami Therī, then she, understanding that the Buddha was going to be then passing away within 3 months, he was 80, she was 120 at that time. So elder, quite elder. So she felt that then that was the signal for her, that was the time for her to be going, and that she should enter parinibbana before the Buddha. So from this Magga full moon and the Buddha's announcement of his impending parinibbana after 3 months, then she gave final 7 days of teachings. And then on this half moon that's coming up, then this is recorded as the day of her parinibbana, together with a large number of the bhikkhunis that she had ordained together with, who were also Shakyan kin of the Buddha, and like her peers who went forth together, practiced together, they realized awakening together, then they according to the text in all of its versions, then they thought it's our time also, and then they decided it's the time. They went to seek the Buddha's permission and blessings, and then their own time of parinibbana. So we can see these things like a kind of looming imminence in a way, then of the parinibbana of the Buddha, also of Mahapajapati, also for Sariputta and Mahamoggallana. We know they also passed away before the Buddha. So, we see them like them becoming arahants earlier on, and they're gathering and, meeting the Buddha at this time. And then also we see appearing and disappearing appearing and disappearing as we look at it. Yes, so we can look at this moon in the events of that day of like the arising and appearing of the Sangha, and then also this great transition, this great cycle of the Buddha's heritage. I just wanted to mention about this because of it being a special day for these reasons. And I thought actually, there are 4 Uposathas in each month, the full moon, new moon, and then the half moons, the lunar quarters. I have an idea, maybe our winter retreat Uposatha program we determined to share on the full moon like today, and the new moon, 6 of them, but I thought maybe I will one more for Mahapajapati Gautami Therī's Parinibbana next week, that day, maybe. No, I have to talk to my Sangha members about this, but I considered about it because I really, as our, passed down as our founding Bhikkhunī and her great Mahaparinibbana, and that of so many of the founding Bhikkhunis, we want to honor and remember and appreciate this puja cha pujaniyanang, honoring those worthy of honor. Etamang kalamuttamang is one of the highest of blessings, the Buddha said. So with that introduction, then as promised, I want to come back to the Ovada Patimokkha, because I think there's a connection here. It's not only that the Ovada Patimokkha is said to have been taught on this full moon night, but I'd like to speak to a connection that I see between it and the Satipattana teachings and practices, which we have been focused on in our Dhamma sharing, our Dhamma study, learning, contemplation, practice, and training during this time. So I'm going to share just one part of the Ovada Patimokkha, which is probably familiar to most or to all of you, and you might have even heard it earlier on in the day today. I was watching on YouTube a program earlier, but I didn't see and hear everything, just some part. So a part of the Ovada Patimokkha goes, Sabba papasang akaranang kusala supasampadang sacittang pariyodapanang etang uddhanasasanam. So Sabba papasa karanang means to avoid doing what is unskillful. Avoid the causes of suffering. In Buddhist terms. It says not to do evil, but in Buddhist terms, this really properly means like coming out of and avoiding the causes of suffering, what is akusala, unworthy, unhealthy, unnoble, unwholesome, not leading to benefit, not leading to liberation. And then kusala supasampada, and then to enter into this shared base of training and of realization, of experience of what is kusala, and that is what is noble, wholesome, worthy, truly beneficial and liberating in the Buddha's teaching. There are 2 kinds of kusala. One is just what's good and has, just good results, but then it's like bound up. The other is unbound, free. That's the kusala that's liberating, that is far more unique to the Buddha's teaching. But then the third aspect, because there are 3 aspects. If you say, okay, avoid the negative, do what's positive, those are like 2 main sides, right? Do and don't do, to be done, not to be done. But then there's one more, the third, and this is the one that I want to focus on here right now, and that is the Sacitta Pariyodapana. And that means for the mind, the citta, the mind or heart. Pariyodapana means to clean up. Even this word is like for the hall before the moon day, then it's like going around and cleaning up, dusting and, mopping and preparing and like cleaning it up really well all around. This is Pariyodapana. But this mentions specifically for the citta, for the mind, for the heart. Some people say, what is it? That this is even not just a result of the first two, but a cause. Because if we don't do that, if our mind is not clear, then how do we really know? We have to rely on others for what they say. When people say, you ask them what's good, what's bad. There may be some agreement, some commonality among people, but there are a lot of different ideas around there. If your own mind is not clear, and if you don't see and know clearly for yourself, then you always have to rely upon the others. And this is just fraught with difficulty. If you're lucky, like Sariputta meeting the Venerable Asaji, then he felt he knew and he was right. Yeah. But how often we've been betrayed or mistaken or just confused or doubtful because of people saying so many different things and showing so many different things, so many different values. So the Sacitta Pariyodapana is said to be not only an effect, but of keeping good sila, and of following those who are wise, but then also a cause for being able to truly see and know for oneself, to develop sampajanya, or clear comprehension, clear awareness of what is actually truly kusala and akusala. So you start with the theoretical level, but then even you have a good theory, still you have to apply it to the circumstances. And then it's like applying it to the circumstances, matching up well with the circumstances. This is called then sapaya, sampajanya, and kochara sampajanya, to train within those circumstances and further develop that sampajanya, clear awareness, discernment within the circumstances. Yes? So then this reduces delusion, and you move towards asammoha sampajanya. So this sati sampajanya training that we're working with here now, this is very important. The asammoha sampajanya, then you've gone from theory to application to discernment within all different kinds of circumstances, to then having this base of clear awareness and understanding, discernment progressively, further and further, where you see and know truly, clearly for yourself. So you have that basis. Then this is also for the Ovada Patimokkha, then this is how it works. For the third aspect, then relating back to the first and the second, what is not to be done, what is to be done. So the base of seeing and knowing for oneself. And this is, of course, then ever so important in the Satipattana training that we're working with right now. I'd like to mention a little bit about this, and a little different than normal. I feel like today I would like to speak a little bit first, then have our meditation time. Rather starting with the meditation time and sharing more Dhamma reflection afterwards, I'd like to speak a little bit first and then go to the meditation. With regards to the Satipattana, Ayya Brahmawada has been sharing from the Satipattana Samyutta, the connected discourses on Satipattana, and I'd like to just take a look at the intro to the Mahasatipattana Sutta now and make the connection here. So the Buddha says, this is the intro to the Mahasatipattana Sutta, Ekāyano ayang bhikkhave Maggo satanang visuddhiya. Sokaparidevanang sammatikamaya dukkha dhamanasanang attangamaya nyayasa adhikamaya nibbanasa satchikiriyaya yadidang chattaro Satipattana. So the first thing that's mentioned here, the Buddha says, bhikkhus, there is this direct path. We'll talk more about Ekāyano a little bit later, but for now we'll translate it as direct path for the purification of beings. Satanang visuddhiya. So this is the connection then with the Sacitta pariyodapanang. We're talking about in Ovada Patimokkha, that is the clearing up of the mind, of the heart, that work. And so people ask hearing Ovada Patimokkha, okay, that's good. Sounds like a good theory. No, don't do what's bad, do what's good, and then clean up your mind, okay? But then how? How do you do that? And the Buddha is saying here that then this is one way, or this is the direct way that leads to this purification or clarity, the clearing of the mind and of the view that is for the overcoming of sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair, and for the attainment of the way, the realization for oneself of the way that the Buddha himself experienced and was teaching. So not an attainment in theory, but an attainment through practice, through one's own direct experience. So this is the knowing for oneself. This path goes to its course is in knowing for oneself. Nyayasa adhikamaya. And then nibbanasa satchikiriyaya, to see and know, to experience directly for oneself this nibbana that the Buddha was talking about. Not only parinibbana, not only nibbana at the time of death, but nibbana in life, awake, alive. That this teaching and this path of practice is for this. The Buddha says, namely, these four foundations for the establishment of mindfulness. So I'd like to then take a little time here. This is what I want to talk about before the meditation. For many of you here, you've done retreats, Satipattana, in mindfulness. Me too. Over the years, a lot of reading, a lot of listening to the Dhamma talks, and so much valuable time working, training, and working with it. And I'm happy to have this time now also to look more deeply, to come back to these teachings and these contemplations and this path of practice again. We are so fortunate to have this opportunity to be able to do this now. So I'd like to share with you some of what I've been studying in this time that I found valuable that I didn't have access to myself, or I didn't encounter earlier on in these teachings on Satipattana. As a young monastic, I'm born in Washington, D.C., here in the United States, straight off the plane, because my parents were in New Zealand and Australia. They're also born in the US, came back for me to be born here. And as a teenager entering monastic life, I went to Europe and then to India. So there are things from the time in India early on in my monastic life. There's something that happens when it's like you're steeped in the culture and people are using the language. I experienced this in Sri Lanka also, because there's so much Sanskrit in the language in Sri Lanka that's commonly used. So you get a sense of, you know, how these words are being used in the living culture, not only just in the text of the sutta and in the dictionary or in the class. So I'd like to share a little bit with you about this, because I found this useful. So in the Pali text traditions, we have this little debate about Satipattana, and does it mean sati plus patthana, like foundations of sati, of mindfulness? If we see in the Indic language in Sanskrit, then it's smriti upasthana. Then we understand that this smriti, this sati, then is one word, and then the second word is the upasthana. And what is that? I found this useful to get a sense of. So, upasthana, this is coming from the Indic context, from Marathi, then also from Sanskrit. Marathi is actually one of the closest living languages to Pali. Yeah. Even the area that's now Maharashtra in India is area also that's considered by some to be maybe the home area of Pali, where Sanghamita Therī and Mahinda Thero came from. So upasthana. So just to understand, for sati, for this mindfulness and these trainings in mindfulness here, then what are we talking about here? Are we talking about establishing or foundations? In Marathi, upasthana, it's the arising, the springing up, the occurring, the coming to pass. Hope. Different sense. When we're talking about sati, and we combine that with upatthana, or Satipatthanas, upatthana, then the bringing up, the arising, the bringing up then of mindfulness, and then it's occurring, means then sati being brought up and then happening, yes? Also, upasthana is used as a form of worship. It's used religiously. Outside of Buddhism, it's very important in the religious context. This is important here because in the Buddha's teaching, then the Buddha was using terms, using symbology, using ideas that were present in the culture, the things that were so important to people, the fire, the wheel, the Atman. Teaching the first three teachings, then we have the turning of the wheel. The wheel is so enormously important and such a symbol of power in the culture of that time. And still now, just think of all of the things that depend upon the wheel in our culture now. It's not so novel to us, but if we think about it, let's just imagine without all those cars and all those engines, that are running on the wheel, just all gone, right? What about the fire and the mastery of fire? At that time in the Vedic traditions, the fire is so important. This is like, the Brahmins then, fire is at the center of also worship. Yeah? Of the people's sense of like what's so fundamental in life. And then also we have next teaching, Anatalakana Sutta. It's talking about Atta, the self, or the Atman, the soul, right? And for religion, how important, and even just ordinarily, let's just take out that word self and that idea of self from everywhere all around right now. And you can just think about it, even trying to do that, and you just see is how prevalent, how strong, how important. Here with the Satipatthana also, we have something like that. I'll share with you about it. So in Marati, for worship, also as the source of mystic prayer, Uposatha. So this is something that's then deep in the religion. But like with the wheel, the Buddha is going to turn this in his own way for the purpose that we just saw in the introduction. The purpose for this has been stated right up front. Yes? So the Buddha has taken the wheel in hand and then using it for this, applying it for this noble purpose, right? And then teachings on fire, the whole fire thing, also looking at this in terms of the Dhamma that he realized and then applied for noble and liberating purpose here as well. So also in Sanskrit then, Uposatha, presence. And here's a part that I find really useful for working with the Satipatthana, to understand about this. Because sometimes I feel in English and Pali text tradition, we get a very technical sense about this that can even sometimes be dry. But in the Indic language, then Uposatha also means the presence, proximity, nearness. We're talking about approaching and then coming very near and into the presence of, in a way that is considered to be intimate, in a way that's considered to be religious, in a way that is involved in other religious traditions with prayer, and even with what's considered or called to be like divine union or service to God. These very words, what we have in Satipatthana, this Uposatha, this is used for this. And the Buddha is then connecting this with the sati. So for me, when I understand deeply about this, it's like in a way, sometimes we get a theory first and then the practice comes afterwards. And we realize in the practice, also sometimes we practice and we experience something, and then it's like we get the theory afterwards. And oh, right, yes, right, that's what it's like actually, isn't it? When you practice with the Satipatthana deeply, isn't it like that? Yes, these are the feelings that one may experience. That is like this is the religion. This is the divine. This is like the life, right? And so these experiences may come. Even I heard from some people sometimes when they felt like just one moment for the first time in their life, they became fully mindful. They explain that it happened. It's like a religious, like talking about the religious experience. And even with regards to the breath, even to be able to take one breath in and one breath out and like be completely wholly, fully intimate, present, and aware with that is sublime, isn't it? If anyone experienced, and then I know we train ourselves, and sometimes it's like a long time, and like trying to work with the breath or coming to the body and working with mindfulness of the body. And it's like training and training and training with that. Nope, not like that for me. I'm not having any moments in the mindfulness zone like these people are talking about. No. But even one has even one moment, even like just 1 second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds in a lifetime that's like that, then we can understand why the Buddha would say with regards to merit, so many things that are so considered to be so meritorious that people make effort in merit to do things that are charitable, to do things that are moral, in so many ways. And yet it's said that even one moment of mindfulness, like true mindfulness, is then surpassing these things in merit. So what's being talked about? Is it this struggle that I'm experiencing with trying to follow my in-breath and out-breath? That's what's being talked about? And of course, then this is applying and directing one's mind to what is considered to be most, wholesome and skillful and helpful and progressive, and is said rightly to incline really one way only. This Ekāyano means when practicing with this rightly, there's one way for it to go. And it's not what so many of the corporate mindfulness teachers are necessarily talking about. It's the point, the purpose is not necessarily for your greater productivity, your income, to be able to shoot more on target, or these kinds of things. Those might be considered some kind of like side effects, right? That may come from working with some part of this teaching and practice when it's been like taken out of the whole context. But let's delve into this whole context here, because this is what we're here for, is for the whole thing, for the whole path, the integrated path, and the whole experience. So then attending to, then guarding, also a word used for the sanctuary or the sacred space, which is then by definition approached with respect, with care and with respect. So this word is actually used for the sanctuary, for the sacred space, and also for those who then attend to the sanctuary or the sacred space, for those who attend to the divinity, for those who are those, say, like sacred guardians or caretakers, kind of Uposatha, in the religious context. This is in Sinhala and Sanskrit, and Upatak, we say in Thai, Upatak, attendant, right? Who's looking out for the teachers. Then also even the words that we have for Upasaka and Upasika, drawing near to be intimate with the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, even not as bhikkhus or bhikkhunis, then these words so close in heart are used here. Then also used related to fulfillment, coming to an end and to perfection, pariyosita, with regards to the living of the holy life, with regards to the brahmacharya. Now, all those who undertook brahmacharya precepts today as part of the 8 precepts, then this is supposed to be one of the great boons of undertaking the Uposatha practice, even on the Uposatha, that one has a chance to draw more near and practice more fully what the Buddha himself, in the way the Buddha himself lived. Yes? And then these words are also used related to monastic ordination, even the full ordination in the Buddhist Sangha, and then also in the Vedic culture. The Uposatha is used also in the Vedic culture. So when we come back to the Ovada Patimokkha here, Kusalas, Uposatha. Uposatha is the word that we use for full or higher ordination of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis in Buddhism. But this Ovada Patimokkha teaching is not only for bhikkhus and bhikkhunis, it's for all of us. It's for everyone who would attend to, contemplate, practice, and benefit from the Buddha's teaching. But it means to enter into the shared base of training and of knowledge and of experience and realization together. This is the fundamental meaning, not only of the monastic higher ordination, although this word is used for the monastic higher ordination. Then also one of the definitions is panya alambana, which means what sets up panya. It's like to be able to, upasthana, one of the meanings also is to be able to like put up, to display like a screen. You have then it provides a context or form or a media then that's set up, that's put up. You develop, you establish that for panya, in which panya is wisdom, insight and wisdom can occur. So it's creating, or rather availing ourselves of the context in which insight and then panya, wisdom, can occur. So setting this up, establishing it. So this is some part of just Satipatthanas, Sati plus Upatthana or Upasthana, that I wanted to share with you in terms of the meaning and in terms of the context. So this is very deep and broad, even in the Vedic culture, greater Indian culture, both used practically, then also very much actively used in religious terms. So the Buddha is then taking this powerful and even still prevalent religious terminology, and then saying in his teaching, this method for the sati, with regards to the sati, this to set up, bring up, establish, enter into, become fluent and intimate with this. Yes? So this is the first part that I wanted to share with you. Is one word. I'd like to share one more. The one more that I'd like to share is a word that really came to mind so strongly and so clearly when the idea was broached about having focus on Satipatthana for our winter retreat time this year. And that is about the Ekāyano. So I know Brahmawada has already mentioned it sometime, and I'd like to mention it a little bit more. So Ekāyano, what does it mean? Give you some definitions here from the greater context and culture. It's not only coming from the Pali text dictionary. Closely attentive, intent, means when the mind is coming together and going one way, being applied one way, fixing one's thoughts on one object. absorbed in, concentrated. In religious terms, Ekāyano is actually used broadly in the Indian context now these days for monotheism. Oh, surprising, right? But why? It's because of the applying the mind, heart, one's religious efforts to in one way. That's why Ekāyano is used in this way. And I want to tell you also in terms of the Vedas, from long ago, even up until now, there's something called the Ekāyano Veda, which is called the Mula Veda. It's called the original Veda. And they say, those who are studying and following that Veda say that's the only path, or that's the only way to the ultimate desideratum, to the spiritual goal. This is the context in which it's used. So there are the priests who do many kinds of different things. Some of them are focused on mantras, and some focused on different kinds of rituals for gaining blessings and for life cycle type things. But the ones who are focused on the Ekāyano, their focus is just on the spiritual goal. This is the meaning. This is the context here. In terms of Vedic orthodoxy, we understand Vedas, at least some, maybe not all that we have now, existed in the Buddha's time, and we see in the suttas the Buddha mentions Vedas and Upanishads. Being aware, probably he was educated in these things as a young person with education. So in the Vedic context, the Ekāyano means what leads solely to emancipation. So I know I already said it, but I noted here the irony with regards to how modern mindfulness is being taught. In the Buddha's teaching, right in the very beginning, talking about in the introduction for Ekāyano, then is not for all the worldly aims that this was taught. In the yogic context also, Ekāyano is used for the center of union, absorption in one, absolute devotedness to one, to unity, and for a path accessible only to one, which means that oneself must walk this path. Oneself must live this path. Oneself must experience this path. So then this word is also used with regards to non-dual freedom. There's more I would like to share with you. I feel like maybe it might be time for us to go to the meditation time. I want to share just a little bit more. Anupassana. This is number 3. Do you have space in your minds and hearts for a third word? We had first word. Satipattana, sati plus upasthana we're talking about. Number 2, we're talking about Ekāyano. Maybe Ekāyano should have been number 1. One more, just one more I'd like to talk about. And that is Anupassana. In the Satipattana Sutta and the Satipattana teachings and practices, then we find used again and again, not Kayānusati, but Kayānupassana is being used for mindfulness of the body or body contemplation. Vedananupassana, Chittanupassana. So what is the Anupassana? Now, I feel for some of of our friends who are joining, if they have South Asian heritage, then also it might be like something so familiar. But for all those who are here who don't have South Asian heritage, getting into the sense of this, I just say, I know, having experienced the retreats and the various teachings, and sometimes the meaning is like just stays like dry and separate and foreign. But this is like to go into it. Then if you listen to the chanting, if you do the chanting of the Satipatthanas Sutta, or you look at the resources, can you share in the chat box the link to the text of the resources? But you look into them, then it starts to become much more deeply meaningful, because this is like, what does the title mean? And for the Buddha's introduction, what is he saying we're working with here? That's like everything comes under that umbrella in this context. What is this? And now for the active means, Anupassana. So anu plus pasati. So we have two main words that are often used in the text for seeing. Pasati. So pasati is to see. Then also we use dasana. Pasana and also dasana. Then someone who has experience with Indian context may know also darshan, darshana, and this seeing, this having the audience with, but it's an intimate thing. It's not just to see, it's something else. So these words are used often almost synonymously. And the root word there is also very common in the Vedic context, pashati, spashati, which actually means to touch with the body, with the heart, with the body, with the mind, with the heart. So it's not like seeing something separate, outside, separate like that, a disassociated seeing. And the reason I want to say this is because so many people, at least in the Western context, have learned something about mindfulness that's kind of like disassociated. It's like you step back and you get separated from and shut off from everything, and then you're just like looking at it from a distance and like very disconnected. But touch is not like that. This pasati, pashati, spashati is also the root in vipassana. So you say means to look into, but also means to touch into, to sense into. So we're not only talking about something intellectual here. We're talking about this can be touched with the body. This can be touched with the breath. This can be touched through the feelings, through all of these bases. In fact, for the Ekāyano, for the Vedic priests, they sit down on four corners for this ritual. At the four corners. For the Buddha's teaching, also you sit down in the four corners. What are the four corners that you sit down with for Anupassana? I know somebody there already maybe knows. What are the four? The Buddha immediately then goes to, then says, Chattaro bhikkhunī, right? Then what are the Chattaro is the four. What are the four? So this is something that's there in the Vedic context. There being four corners or four like bases for this. But the Buddha has chosen four bases that he learned and discovered for himself, even in his own process of awakening. It's through this very process with the body, breath, feelings, mind, and contemplations that he said in discovering the middle way, then his intuition turned to this. He practiced for himself then after all these harsh austerities and practicing so many things that didn't work. He found what actually did work. And having experienced it for himself, then this is what he taught. So this is different than having a priest posted at each of the four corners. This is, we post ourselves at each of these four places, right? Which are here with us. They're not some other place. We contain, we have all four with us, but we're going to give rise to them and then enter deeply into very closely to touch, to see, to know, to touch into and to sense into and experience very closely for ourselves. So anu also, anu in this case with pasana, anu is something that means progressively or successively, comes by stages. Yes? So then anu can mean something that follows or comes after, but in terms of successive stages, the stages are you look for it, then you catch sight of it, and then you discover it. So you look for it. These are the successive stages for pasana, pashati, for touching it for ourselves. We're looking for it, right? We're looking. So we're looking, and then we catch sight of it. We start to be able to see it. We start to be able to sense it, start to feel like we're in touch. And then we discover it. So these are the stages. Anupassana, anupashati. Yes? So to see, to recognize, then to realize, then to know. And this then is very closely and often combined with janati, which means then knowing. It's the word that we find in Sampajanya, which we say clear knowing, clear awareness, clear comprehension is then like superpower of janati, and we find it develop progressively. Janati and then pajanati and then sampajanya. It's like stronger and even could be called like prajanya is more holy, more sacred, and then sampajanya is even more inclusive, including everything. It just all becomes much stronger, but the root is in the knowing. So to see, to recognize, to realize, to know. So spashati, to touch, to make evident or clear, and then to inform. Even we have spy in English, its root is also in spash. Yeah, but he's look into, look and get that information. So I feel like all the English translations that we have for Anupassana, when we try to get one word, don't all really like get into this deeply. So when we talk about looking into, this is quite literal: investigation, introspection, examination, exploration, analysis, researching into, delving into, probing, scrutinizing, surveying, studying, reflecting, and contemplating. And I don't know how you feel when you hear these words, but for me, many times also, this can have a kind of like a dry intellectual sense to it that doesn't get into the meaning in the same kind of way as I hope you're able to get from hearing this introduction to these three like primary leading and introductory and then main like practical effective words that are used here in this teaching for practicing with it. And I have to say that at least for me, this makes a difference. It makes a difference in terms of like opening up what the Buddha is showing to and sharing with us and how the Buddha and others in the early days of the Buddha's teaching, as well as even now in South Asia, might understand or sense, from even just from the language and from the context. I really want to, to offer and to share that as much as I can. And for those who have such experiences in the practice, to let you know that you're not out in left field. It's not something, wrong or weird or strange that you're having what feels like and seems like a religious experience with your Satipatthana practice. That in the context in which the Buddha is introducing this would have even been done deliberately. To use these kinds of words, these kinds of symbols, and then also give unique, powerful, effective teaching that leads to the experience, the training, through the training. So now I'd like to offer some time for our meditation. There's more that I wanted to share with you, but may I be content for now and happy, and may we just touch into, explore, see, know, catch sight of, discover for ourselves. And if we're already very well established, well familiar, then just the offering of the time of such relief and comfort and ease as it is to take refuge in and to course in this way, this path of practice. Let's have some meditation time. I'm going to ring the bell once to begin and 3 times at the end of our meditation. Beginning with our posture. Making of ourselves and our bodies and minds now an island in a way. Bringing our attention in to the body. If we're sitting in a sitting posture, bringing mindfulness to the fore. May even seem like setting up mindfulness in front of us, the space of the body. The body sitting can be like half a circle or half a triangle. With mindfulness to the fore, it can seem like the full circle. Coming to the breath, feeling the breath in, the breath out. Just noticing, is the breath short or long or medium? To start, just noticing the breath. And then as we breathe, with the breath, becoming sensitive to the body. As we breathe with the breath, experiencing the body as we breathe in and breathe out. It's very natural when we bring our attention to the breath, that the mind will want to then explore and experience the body as we breathe. Moving around, spreading around to different parts of the body. Breathing sensitive to the body. Breathing in and out, experiencing the whole body. And then as we breathe, using the breath to calm the body. Calm the whole body. Parts of the body like calming the belly. Using the breath to calm the shoulders, the back. Even out into the arms and legs. Even bringing calm from the top of our head down through the shoulders and chest and hips and through the whole body. Breathing in the way that's progressively calming the body. Releasing, relaxing, opening, unbinding. Noticing where we have the feelings of relaxation with the breath. Of the calming of the body with the breath. Where we feel and notice it most. Is it in the belly, the chest, the fingertips? The back, the shoulders? May move around and spread, observing, interested, watching and with the process. Notice where the points of contact are with the breath. As we're feeling relaxation. See if the mind comes to and draws to a primary point of contact. And watch the breath there. This becomes the center. Feeling of the breath, a spread of relaxation through the body. With looking at that point, we become more deeply calm. Focus on the seeing and knowing quality. As you're watching that place. Sensitive, not forcing. Sensitive awareness. Train yourself in being sensitive in this way. You don't have to get it right the first time. You might notice that your mind pushes too hard, or is kind of squirmy. To touch, to experience calming, seeing and knowing in a sensitive way. Still knowing the in and out breath. And how it is. If it naturally becomes smaller in motion, this is normal. If there's the feeling of needing to breathe into that space, then do so. Just see, know, feel that. Calming and opening, releasing. Train yourself in calming everything in the whole body. From the center point of tranquility. Sense inside the body, also the outside of the body, surface, skin, inside and outside. Noticing the rising and falling of the breath. Also the rising and falling of other physical sensations, perceptions, how they're appearing. Also how they're disappearing. Notice how sensations and perceptions are appearing and disappearing. This is our home base. This is good to establish very well and come back to again and again and again. As we go out exploring with Satipattana, or go in exploring, looking into, contemplating different things. We'll come back to this again and again. We should well establish our home base. Well establish it and habituate ourselves to coming back again and again. These three parts: contemplating the body internally and externally, seeing and knowing appearing, disappearing, feelings, sensations, perceptions, and then just the knowing. Just this clear, reflective awareness. Letting just knowing and awareness be the nutriment and sustenance of knowing, of seeing and knowing. Just the knowing. Really sensing and touching into this knowing quality. These three are our home base. Sensing, seeing, knowing the body internally and externally. That's the interior and exterior of this body. The appearing and disappearing of sensations, whether sounds, smells, visual sensations, tactile sensations. That feeling of a moment ago that arose and is now disappeared, and another. And sound is appearing and disappearing. Touch appearing and disappearing. And coming back to the knowing. Just to that quality of knowing, seeing and knowing. Aware of being aware. Not involved with anything else. Just giving attention to the knowing. Abiding with and in the knowing. when we're practicing ourselves, and then it's time to move, then also to just notice the motion. When it's time to walk or stand or lie down, know the posture. Know how the body is positioned. And then come back to this contemplation of the body, internally and externally. The appearing and disappearing. Come back to the knowing. We go for walking meditation or walking back and forth. Just know that we're walking back and forth. Yes, we can practice with it more detail than that. At least know this. And when we look back and forth, know that we're looking. So when we're walking, standing, seated or lying down, when we're falling asleep, when we're waking up, when we're talking, when we're keeping silent, we know the body, in the body, internally, externally. We see appearing and disappearing, sensations, perceptions. We come back to the knowing, just the knowing. When we practice with the different parts of the body meditation, the hair of the head, hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, all of the various organs, fluids. And then also come back to the home base. Be sure to well train yourself in it and well establish it. Come back then just to seeing and knowing the body internally, externally. Rising and passing. And come back again just to the knowing. This is the home base to return to again and again. You can begin with this, then explore, investigate, and come back to this home base. Train yourself in this way. So that whatever you look into and explore, your mind and body will be trained and conditioned to come back again to this very basic awareness, whether walking, standing, seated, or lying down, looking this way or looking that. mindful and aware of the body internally and externally, of appearing and disappearing, rising and falling, the breath, all sensations and perceptions, and come back again to the knowing. Only the knowing, just the knowing. Developing your home base very deeply and well. Likewise, if you practice with the elements, earth, water, fire, and wind, the great elemental properties, exploring, investigating, looking into them internally and externally. Come back to appearing and disappearing, rise and fall, and only the knowing. Train yourself. Whether sitting, also standing, also walking, also lying down, before going to sleep, when waking up, when looking one way, looking another way, when walking here or there. And come back again, knowing the body internally and externally. Breath, rise and fall, sensations, perceptions. Only the knowing. Home base. For all our Satipattana explorations, contemplations. If we enter into the charnel ground contemplations, or walking in the forest, we see the dead animal or dead bird. It's just passed away recently. Or that's been partly eaten. Or where there are worms and maggots. Or just a little bit of bones and feathers and beak still remaining connected. Or we come upon an antler here. Pile of shells at the side of the creek or on the seashore. Bleached white bones. Whether contemplating in our imagination, using our memory, or out walking in the forest or on the seashore, or along the roadside. We can look, see, know, contemplate deeply. This body too is of the same nature. It will be like that. It's not exempt from that fate. And then we come back again with that knowledge and understanding to contemplating the body internally, externally. Seeing rise and fall of the breath, feelings, sensations, perceptions, moments of awareness, consciousness flickering in and out of existence. And come back to the knowing. Kayānupassana, viharati, atapi, sampajano satima, vinayaloke, apicha domanasan. Walking, listening, sensing, feeling. You come back. Body internally, aware of the body, in the body, internally, externally. Rise and fall of the breath. Appearance, disappearance of sensations, perceptions, consciousness. And the knowing. Hearing, appearing, disappearing. Coming back to the knowing. Rise and fall of the breath. Appearing, disappearing. Coming back to the knowing. Dear Venerables, Dhamma friends, I'm interested in your thoughts, your experience, questions, what you would like to share. Sheila, would you like to say something? You don't have to, I just saw your hands in Anjali.
And thank you so much Venerable. This was a beautiful night. And what I wanted to say is, in your explanation of the definitions of the three words and adding the context, the language as well as cultural context and deeper meaning, I could feel so much more in your teaching. I truly could feel in my body the true meaning of Satipattana and the application as we meditate. So sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, 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 anumodami. I'm so glad to hear that. Thank you for sharing. You know, for me, this has been so important, and I feel like there are many challenges in having been born a Westerner, in living the Buddhist monastic life and practice. Places where it's possible to train and practice like this in monastic life in North America are not so many, and where the community is supported in living with the Vinaya, and to be able to have the winter retreat time like this also rare. I feel so fortunate, and I think if there's anything that can come from having been born in the US and grown up here, and then also having spent the time living in India and the years staying in South and Southeast Asia and East Asia, and that the language that I have from having been born here, if there's anything that that can be shared, that can be helpful to others to help open up this understanding and path of practice and the experience of the path, it's, that it just gives me so much joy and gladness for myself to be able to access and what the Buddhist traditions have offered in terms of these teachings and experience. And then also, I feel like that's the greatest treasure, and the only other greatest treasure is to just have the real honor and privilege to be able to, to share the teachings and the time of practice and discuss about the Dhamma together. Amongst our monastics here, now Ayya Brahmavara is normally a fountain to say something, but I don't want to require her because she's been giving all day, earlier morning and later morning and afternoon, and then our precepts program here that was not online, just for the monastic community. If you wish, you're welcome, but no requirement.
Well, I thank you your invitation. I really like, these words are really amazing to explore, and it really does give extra kind of dimensions to the practice of Satipattana to really tease out the meaning. So I'm just very much appreciating this teaching, and like our good friend said, it really does make a difference to consider the meaning of this extraordinary sutta and these phrases that are repeated over and over again in the sutta. So significant, so much emphasis. So to really explore, what does it mean? Thank you so much, Ayya.
Thank you, Ayya. Yes, please. Patipada. I'm going to see if this works. Turning the mat towards you.
growing up in a Brahmin home and being taught the Vedas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Mahabharata, Ramayana, especially the Srimad Devi Bhagavatam. What you brought tears to my eyes today, because you.
I saw your eyes shining several times during my speaking. The light of her eyes was like coming out.
You lit me up from the inside out, because everything that I've been taught, you connected to the practice I'm doing now. The Buddha grew up in an India where the education of boys was about the religious texts. And it just makes so much sense to understand that he would connect with the people using concepts they understood, and to give them a new perspective on why they value darshan and why they worship with their heart. You made connections for me that no one has ever pulled together. And I finally feel like the teachings I've had all of my life isn't separate from what you're teaching me here. And I thank you for that so very much.
I'm so glad to hear that. Those who are online couldn't hear earlier on because the mics weren't working. And I fired it out a couple of times. But I told everyone who was here that originally on the Uposatha, the teaching is just for those who have, physically gathered together. And this is also for them, means for you, for those who are here physically together this evening, as well as those who are online together. The way things are set up, it can seem like this is a presentation for online, and the monastic community is like an audience or something, but my thought from the very beginning was very much also number one for those who are here, and second number one for everyone who's online. Anyone else here or online who would like to share something? I know we started about 10 minutes late due to our Wi-Fi situation. Venerable Dhammawada, you don't have to. I'll call on those at the Hermitage next. I can barely see them smiling in the little box. I tried for the meditation time this evening actually to very closely follow the text of the Māgha Satipatthanas Sutta itself, although not spending a lot of time with each of the investigation, contemplation aspects. So very, very tiny time. I know you've been learning, and 32 parts of the body, then you've been hearing from Ayya Brahmavada and working with, and whether 4 great elemental properties or 6 great elemental properties also you've been hearing and you've been working with, and so many of these I know you have. And yet also in the sutta there's a way that what I was calling the home base or the refrain can disappear with the ellipses. And I feel like these different contemplations are so powerful when you really go into them. It's actually very important. I want to highly recommend really developing the home base, what I was calling the home base, those 3 qualities, and starting with them, and then going into, delving into and exploring these other contemplations, and coming back, really giving good time to come back again. Many times the way these are taught, then it's like you're just going into them without setting up that base, or without coming back out into that base again, and going from one step to another step. And like even for the what are called the charnel ground contemplations, this home base is there intermingled between the different stages. So if we trust that the sutta is giving actual directions for practice, and that we can practice it as it's set forth, that means not just to, pick up and go through all of those stages at once, but to go into one part and then come back out into the what I was calling the home base, those 3 aspects. I feel this is important, and when we do this in this way, my own observation is that our bodies and minds become accustomed to, contemplating things, looking into them, and then also that in a way the habit comes to be then coming back to the body, internally, externally, coming back to seeing rising and falling, and coming back to then just the knowing. And we don't want it to just become habitual, but we become conditioned to do that. And I think there's a reason for that when things are repeated over and again in the suttas, especially for something that's like instructions. I want to encourage not just skipping over where the ... is there in the text, but really, I took the time earlier on today actually to type out the entire section over and again. And when chanting, I want to encourage to do that, even if you're listening to a recording that just jumps over that because the person who is chanting is has been reading a ... so they skip that part. I think it's best, if you can, for the chanting, come back to where the ellipse is and repeat that part again. That will help in the patterning, in the conditioning that's conducive to really establishing or delving into and making the really good base, setting up the really good base and foundation for then these contemplations, these explorations to be really fruitful. And I want to say, in a way, like secure ground for really looking into the things deeply. If we don't sense that security and we don't have that base well established, we probably won't. We won't look into it that deeply like that, because something in our mind will protect us. It will try to keep us safe from seeing what we're not able to handle yet, from what we're not really yet able to see and know clearly in a balanced and insightful way, because the foundation for it is not yet well established. So give the time and care to developing and establishing that foundation. And that, I think, really, when you know that, there's a sense of, I don't know if security is the right, safety or security is the right word, but when you know you have a home base that you can come back to, that's like going to be available to you as long as you have consciousness. If you're unconscious, maybe not. But we hear even from the people who are in the coma. Our good friend who was on earlier on today was in a coma for a period of time. So she's considered to be unconscious, but actually her report was that she's conscious. She is aware. She had awareness. She had perception during the time of being in the coma. She's very sensitive to the hearts of other people and could tell what they're thinking, even about her and about things during that time. So all of that perception, awareness, consciousness was there, even while being technically, medically unconscious, even in a coma, right? So as long as you have awareness, some people say, no, but you need a body for this. But if you look at the three factors of this base, then yes, if you don't have any body perception, then the first one is not going to be available. But if you have consciousness, the second one will be available, and also the third. And so knowing that you can return to this being habituated to, I think really helps develop and establish. And the idea of the Satipattana being also foundation, the establishment and foundation aspect is very deep in the Pali text traditions, teachings, and practice. Even if it's not completely along the lines of the Uposatha, as in the Indic and South Asian context in which this teaching was originally, I believe, developed and taught and practiced to fruition. But still, you know, that's developing and establishing as foundations, as basis, is big in the Pali text tradition. And I think there is value, big value in doing that. Last call, Ananea, I see you there now. Greetings to you on this Magga full moon, and also to those at the Hermitage. Do you have anything you'd like to say, share, ask in our last couple of minutes together? Or Ruanti?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ayya, for the Dhamma teachings tonight. Exploring the meanings of the words really added a whole new dimension to the perception that I had towards meditation, Satipatthana understanding. So I think I would approach my meditation. It really kind of closed the gap rather than meditation as an exercise. I would approach it as approach it with a more welcoming, much more close. I would have, I think, with a much more embracing attitude. Learning the meanings really changed my heart today. So I really thank you for the teachings tonight.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you very much for sharing, and for your way of listening and taking in the teaching. I deeply appreciate that. Ananea, yes, please.
I just want to, just a little add-on or whatever to what Sheila started out with and what Ruanti just said too, is that having that deeper context is really valuable. For me personally, I really like historical context and what all is brought forward into the teachings. And this your explanation very specifically highlighted, it's an obvious thing, which is that the Buddha was completely versed and expert in the Vedas. He had all of that teaching and understanding that he brought forward as he entered in his search for enlightenment. So he had the full background of that as a base as he pursued his way to enlightenment. And I think that's a really important fullness to be aware of, is that it, wasn't just that, he wasn't an advanced being, he came in and he did all these things, but that there was a whole thing that was going on with him. It wasn't just some sort of, drop in and then, see the signs and then, he's on his way to enlightenment. It was way more fuller than that. So bringing the language and really pulling that apart was quite good. And I thank you also for that and others' remarks.
I want to say, as Bhanteji often says, thank you for your patient listening. I was concerned you'll be very bored that I'm just like a talking dictionary this evening. Our understanding of the Buddha and of the context is not just something out there, or not just something that happened long ago. It's something that's unfolding for us in the path now, when that becomes fuller for us and say like more deeply grounded, or opens up, or becomes more contextualized, or even just change in language that we're familiar with, and that language also of the heart can open up access for us, and can open up that really that touching the path, touching the ground of the path for ourselves. And so it works like that. So many different access points. Aneka pariyayena, as the Buddha often said, really looking for what are the access points in people's experience, in their hearts, in the way their minds are, looking out for that and then going for that, using all these things of the context and drawing them all together into the ground of the path of the practice. Like it's also said, the different streams then flowing into the noble stream and then all coming together in the great ocean, right? So the beautiful imagery that's also used for the Ekāyano. Let us end here now for tonight under this Magga full moon, remembering the Buddha's awakening and great dedication and generosity to all of us, to thinking back to Sariputta, Mahamoggallana, Mahapajapati, all those first 500 Bhikkhunis, and 1,250 members of the Sangha gathered together. All the members of the Sangha now also in the Buddha's way, Buddhanubuddhang, now down to this day, alive in our world on this full moon night tonight. Just like to think about receiving all the blessings of the Buddha, the Arahants, all our Kalyanamitas and benefactors, and then also sharing blessings back for our efforts through our Patipada Puja, to offer our veneration through the offering of our practice back to all of them and to ourselves. And if there are any blessings that can be shared with those who are our guardian angels, our benefactors, in so many ways. I want to think about sharing merits and blessings with them. All those who are still alive, those who have already passed away, our ancestors, also those who are still coming into our world and to be born, that the Dhamma and path of practice be present in our world is an enormous blessing. May we also hold all of these merits ourselves and really galvanize them, activate them and apply them, be generating and investing them into our own well and rightly applied effort, our cultivation, our training in the Satipatthanas and Ekāyano, in the Ekāyano way, that we experience the fruits, progressively experience the fruits of the path for ourselves. We dedicate to this individually and collectively as a community, near and far. I'd now like to chant the verses of sharing and aspiration and invite our monastic community and anyone who knows these verses to join in together, thinking of all our benefactors, also all the leaders in our world. I want to share blessings with them, as much as possible. And if we have any karmic debtors, anyone with whom we have any unresolved issues or business, think about sharing merits and blessings with them for the pacification, reconciliation, bringing to peace, healing, release, and freedom with blessedness. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration.
The goodness that arises from my practice.
May our spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, our mothers, our fathers, and our relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest devas and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of our lives. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless. Through the goodness that arises from our practice, and through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until we realize Nippanam in every kind of birth. May we have upright minds, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken our resolve. The Buddha is our excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma.
The solitary Buddha is our noble guide. The Sangha is our supreme support.
Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and delusion be dispelled. Now, to the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha, the Noble Triple Gem, Arahang Samma Sambuddho Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi Sawakato Bhagavata Dhammam Dhammang Namasami Satipatthanas Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sangha Namami. Triple gem blessings.